Hi, I am Stephen Hua. I have many YouTube videos on different subjects of Tai Chi, but all of them, in one way or the other, touch upon the topic of internal discipline of Tai Chi. That is, how one uses the internal energy to power external movements of arms or legs. And many of my viewers very much interested in learning that. So they tried to learn from the YouTube video. They said, oh, I see your upper body turning move. And I can see that your core muscle moves certain ways. And I try to imitating that. But I can't do it. Can you teach me? Or some the people said, I see your upper quarter body push movements and how the core muscle moves. And I want to copy that. But I cannot do it. Can you teach me? Well, this is the wrong way to approach to learn the internal discipline. You cannot learn this way. For several reasons. First of all, what you see on the video may be only part of it, what is going on in the body. For example, the turning movement, there's actually hidden movement in the lower part of the body, which actually exert a counter force to your upper body turning direction. That goes the counter direction. And one of the purpose is to stabilize the pelvis, so your pelvis is not turning. The second, it is providing a twist force. In most times, it's hidden because you just see that the pelvis is not moving, okay? But in certain instances, you can see very clearly the counter force is working here. So let's look at that segment.
You notice that when I make a turn, pay attention to the belt buckle position here. When I make a turn to the left, in fact, my belt buckle position turn to the right. If I'm going right, the belt buckle position turn to the left. So the twist is right over in this position. So again, I'm using the abdominal and the back to make this twist movement.
So you see, the situation is much more complex than what you can see from the video. Secondly, the core muscle, especially the abdominal area, there are many different sets of muscle arranged in different ways to control movement in different directions. There is no way a teacher could tell you how to use which set. And also, you will not be able to segment your muscle into different pairs and control it. So the teacher cannot teach you, and you will not be able to control it. So there's no way you can learning start from the internal muscle area. The only way to learn the internal discipline, the only way is from outside in. So let me explain what is outside in. Outside in means you learn external movements correctly, precisely, and have the body posture or skeletal structure correctly. So you practice it that way day in and day out. Gradually, your non-responsive and dull core part of the muscle starts to respond to the external movements. And gradually, it falls into the right track with the external movements. And eventually, the internal movements and external movements unified into one. Because teacher can teach you the external movements correctly, precisely. And you could try to do it correctly. Although that is in many times takes a long time because people have bad habits. So they cannot do the movements correctly because their previous bad habits or their body posture, they cannot carry their body posture correctly because of previous bad habits. So that usually is actually quite time consuming for a lot of people to correct their previous bad habits so they can do the external movements with the right body posture correctly. But at least it is teachable and you could learn from it because it's all these external things you can learn it. And that is exactly what all the masters teach internal discipline. That is how Master Wu Jianquan teach my teacher, Yang Hubiao, and Yang Hubiao taught me in that way, using square form and round form. Now let's take a quick look at the square form.
Historically, the square form was taught only to the inner circle of students who were groomed to be the heir to the master's martial art dynasty. These students were usually the family members of the master and a few selected outsiders who served as apprentices to the master. I think there are several reasons that the square form was not taught to the general student body. Certainly, one is the time availability of the teacher as well as the student, since the learning of square form is very time consuming. It is also a severe test on the perseverance and aptitude of the student.
Many Tai Chi practitioners criticize this form of a square form as too precise, mechanical, and robotic. Yes, it is. The reason is you need that for many reasons, but for training the internal discipline, especially you require that. Because, don't forget, you are training initially your core body is unresponsive to your demand. It is dull. It's not very sensitive. So think about you are training a dog to do tricks. So what you have to do, your training method has to be precise and repeatable. If you have a wishy-washy training routine, you are never training the dog to do tricks. So you are training your dog here. Has to be precise, instruction has to be precise and repeatable. So let's take a look at an example here. How we train the walking in Tai Chi, taking a step, how we use the internal power to taking a step in the walking. To take a step, you bend your knee, lift the foot forward, put down, without the body go forward. Body still stay back. Now you drop the toe by tilting the pelvis. Otherwise, if you don't tilt in the pelvis, your body will go forward with dropping the toe. So, drop the toe, body stay back. Now, you use the core muscle pulling on the front foot. When the front foot bends, you bring the body forward. So now you can see this movement, the internal core muscles movement. And for most students have the bad habit of body go forward, in putting down the foot, body go forward a little bit, drop the toe, body go forward. If your body is already go forward, you don't need to using the internal core. The other one is pushing. Instead of pulling using the core muscle, pulling on the front foot, they push a little bit. Any kind of this push, you're not using the core muscle. You are using leg muscle to push. That's external movement. So you have to use the internal core, then you cannot push. So these are the bad habits when students come to learn, is very difficult to correct. So in the small circle square form, we use the external movements to induce the internal movement, to train the internal movement. After you finish with the square form, then we graduate to the small circle round form. Now in the round form, the concentration now is on the internal movement, not on the external movement anymore. It is to train the internal movements to the degree that it becomes intuitive. It becomes part of you. You don't have to think about it. So when you finish this program, your internal core is now can do very complex but powerful movements. Complex plus power. Normally we talk about the dexterity of the hands. Well, now you have dexterity in your core. And it is also intuitive, almost instant response, very, very quick. So now the core is the master. External limbs, arms and legs, just follow the core. So that is what we can generally say. In the square form, we go from external, outside in, from outside in. Once we get to the round form, we start learn how to go from inside out. Learning this program by the students and teach this program by the teacher, the master, are both major commitments. So I'm going to spend some time talk about that. First, the traditional teaching method. Second, the present teaching method I'm using now. The economic and the social situation of the time has great influence on the formulation of the teaching method. In the old time, before the popularity of firearms, the job opportunity for martial artists were plentiful. Just take one line of profession, the armed escort of transportation of goods and money. Don't forget, the transfer of money at that time is a big deal because you are shipping silver, which is bulky and heavy. They're saying that time that bandits looking at the cart's wheels track in the dirt can tell how much silver is on that cart. And there are other lines of business which employ many martial artists. So a student coming to learning martial art, he doesn't have to, he can be very concentrated on learning, dedicated, just the martial art. Because he knows when he graduates, he has a job opportunity waiting for him. This is certainly very different from nowadays. Nowadays, students come to learn Tai Chi. Mostly, it's just their interest in learning. They have other jobs, professions, which will support their livelihood. So this is just a secondary pursuance of their own interest. So the difference in the attitude of the students greatly influence how one can structure the teaching program. As far as the teacher, the master, at that time, their major concern is to find students who can help them and who can succeed them of their school and business and be a provider to the teacher also. This group of students are usually master's own children or the so-called indoor students. It is this group of students that qualify to learn the small circle Tai Chi. Now, we often hear people complaining at the old time, masters, the teacher, sometimes hold back on information about the teaching or not talking very much. Well, there is actually a reason for it. A training session is not just only training. It's also an evaluation session, kind of like a test, because he wants to be able to tell which student has it or which student does not have it. For the students who have it, with their hard-working practice and their talent, they will discover what is not said by the teacher and move ahead faster than the other students. Let me use an actual example to illustrate that point. Among all the internal moves in Tai Chi, the upper quarter body move was considered to be the most advanced and most powerful. Most of the fetching moves are using upper quarter body move. Because it is considered most advanced, it was not fully included in the square form. The square form is designed to try to avoid upper quarter body move and leave that in the round form for students to learn and perfect. The traditional square form has certain places different from the round form because to avoid the use of the upper quarter body move in the square form. Now I look back, I think I know all the internal move after finish the square form except the upper quarter body move. And that about 14 years later after start learning, one day I suddenly discovered that I'm doing the upper quarter body move and using all the core and everything. So then it is possible I know that move before that time, but I didn't discover that. I didn't know I'm doing the upper quarter body move because the concept of internal move was not emphasized in the traditional teaching method. After all, if you follow the teaching method of square form, round form, you will learn internal move anyway, what's the point about tell you about the internal move beforehand? Later, when I look back, how did I learn the upper quarter body move? So I analyze and try to remember, and I find that is the way I learned the upper quarter body move. In the square form, the places where the upper quarter body move is included mainly is in the push forward move. The push forward move, the instruction about the push forward move is that you forward, do not stretch your arm out. Never stretch your arm out. Do not move your shoulder out. Just keep it still. So move like this. After you practice a while, especially when you start into round form, gradually, since I cannot stretch this out, since I cannot move my shoulder like this, gradually, I'm starting using my back, push forward. So that's how I learn the upper quarter body move, by not moving this part and the shoulder. So now you have to move your back. And when you move the back like this, the back muscle stretches the oblique muscle and stretches the abdominal muscle. So now you have this. So again, it is the strict external movement instruction. After you practice for a long time, it gradually, you will move the internal. Certainly, that time I have my own business and busy with that, and only practice a little bit every day. So it takes a long time. But I think if you are a old-time indoor student, really dedicated to learning, you probably could develop that internal move fairly quickly. But also, later on, when I analyze this upper quarter body move, I find there are tricks or shortcuts or tips you can use to teach students so they can learn much, much faster. Well, so why these tips and shortcuts not included in the traditional teaching method? That is why they want to use that to see the difference in the quality of the students. Good students, they'll find that themselves. My teacher, Yang Huabiao, made one change in the traditional teaching method, that he treated all the students came into his class the same. They all start from the small circle, square form, and then the round form. And he felt that's the only right way to learn. I agree with him. I want to do the same in my class. But I did notice in his class as well as in my class that students' dropout rate is too high. They lost interest fairly quickly and they quit the class. Well, first of all, the square form, from the first move, lifting the hand, to the first move in walking forward the brush knee, I counted it's about 55 movements. And that is only a small segment of the 108 long form. When nowadays students come into class, say 2 times a week, or sometimes 1 time a week, they just cannot remember the movements sufficiently good that they feel confident they can practice in the home. If they don't practice, no progress. No progress, students lost interest. So the first thing I did was to videotaping the form in great detail and make it available to the students so they can review it anytime they want to. The irony is, if a student learns a first segment of movements, the next segment of movements will be a little bit easier because the consistency in the logic of the movements it carries on. So the question is to help students go over the initial difficult hump. The second thing is I have to find a way to enhance students' interest in keep on learning, maintain their interest in the learning process. To me, that time, the beautiful logical structure of the movements appears to me. The other thing is that the challenge that I have to control my movements very precisely as required. In other words, I have to really sharpen my neuromuscular control. So that challenge also appears to me. The important thing that time also, I started learning Tai Chi when I was 40 years old. Have a lot of lower back trouble. Once I start on the square form, with the forward lean, stretch the spine, and learn how to engage the core to protect the lumbar spine, all those kind of measures, very quickly my lower back problem went away. And that happened to several of my other students who came into class with lower back problem, and the same results. And there are many other health benefits by practicing the form. But most students are very healthy when they come in. When they're healthy to begin with, the benefits of these health benefits may not show right away. Then I noticed that all students are very much interested in the internal movement concept, moving internally. Some of the students, when they manage to make one internal move, they would be very excited and happy for many days. So I have to heighten recognition of the internal discipline in the form to the students, that they realize that's what they are doing, and bring the internal discipline training up to the beginning of the Tai Chi Form. So I categorize all the internal movements in the Tai Chi Form into several major categories and develop basic, simple, easy to learn internal movements representing this category for the students to start on. In addition, I take a close look at my own internal movements, not just only the movements, but the feedback sensation in my own body. And I discover there are additional instructions, tips, or shortcuts one could use to teach students. They will learn the internal discipline much faster. This is especially true with the advanced upper quarter body movements. There are some very important additional instruction so that they can learn much, much faster. So I put all these together into a beginner's course to let the beginning students learning the basic internal moves, the internal discipline, before even they start on the Tai Chi Form movements. And I tested on my students for quite a few years and found it's very successful. So 3 years ago, I have put these ideas into the new teaching program for the small circle Tai Chi on my Teachable website. So these are the video teaching course.
This course is where my beginning students learn their basic internal moves. One of my students taking the contents of this course to teach nursing home and senior living residents. And the response is so good that less than a year, she got so much request to teach that she cannot handle. All the students in the class love this course, and many of them have health issue, mobility issue, and many of them show improvements. So even this course is designed as a prerequisite course before studying Tai Chi Form movements, but it is also can use it as a stand-alone course to teach populations who are not likely to study the Tai Chi Form but get the health benefits inherent in the internal discipline of this course. The form instructions separate into several sections. Each section contains several form movements of the 108 long forms. The first few sections only contain square form. I want students to really get a hang about the square form. Then later sections, it will have square form and the corresponding round form. I will show a sample of one section to illustrate the organization of each section. Some people hesitant to learn from video. They prefer go to the class and stand behind the teacher to learn the movements. But that is actually the most inefficient way of learning. You watch the teacher, at the same time you try to move. You see only large movements. Neglect the minor ones, especially the footworks, angles, positions, and the footwork is the most important. It's the foundation of movement. That's why here we always label the directions so you can see the angles of the movements correctly. And sometimes you have to turn your head to see the teacher, or sometimes you can't even see the teacher because you're back against him. I also including a back view video, which you can follow it just like stand behind the teacher. But the front and the side view, the visual learning is extremely important. In fact, my teacher think that way. Every class, he wants us to just sit there, watch him play the form. Just watch. This kind of visual learning really saves because he lived in Hong Kong and visit Rochester, New York, where I was just from time to time. And later on, my business is away from Rochester. I don't have much chance to see him. But during all this time, I could practice because the visual learning. I remember his movements, remember his words. As far as learning Tai Chi Form movements, the video actually is the most efficient way of learning. Here, you can go back and forth, reviewing the step again and again. And you can also change the streaming speed, goes as low as half speed. And you can download the stream video from Teachable to your own storage, like USB drive, so forth. The only time class and group learning is important is when you want to do push hand and sparring exercise. But learning the form is very much a private affair.
you constantly negotiating with yourself. This is especially true when you are a little bit advanced. Teachable does provide means to communicate with the teacher. Here, I will show tricky parts of the movements and also show some examples of martial art application of the movements. It is not that I'm training a fighter here. Martial arts intent of the movement is a critical contributing factor that you will be able to learn the form. I have a YouTube video called Importance of Martial Arts Intent in Tai Chi Form Practice. I encourage you to take a look at that YouTube video because it is such an important part of the learning program. Since students beginning on the form instruction course have already learned basic internal disciplines, internal movements, so I modify slightly the traditional square form to include all the internal movements. That is really the upper quarter body movement. So now the square form and the round form has one-to-one correspondence. In other words, when one finishes the square form, transition to the round form, there's no new movements one has to learn. Choreographically, the transition from square form to the round form is extremely easy. But now you have to generate internal moves with every external move with the help using martial art intent. After you struggle with this for a while, then the generation of internal movements becomes natural to you. This is like in the class, you stand behind the teacher and following teacher's movements.
Now, with all the tools available to you, I hope you will take up on learning the small circle Tai Chi and unlock all the treasures in it for you.